At the end of a dirt road, many miles away from any town, deep in the pine woods of Mississippi, stood an old wooden house built in the 1940s. The current owner of the home was named Corderal Washington. Corderal had just gotten home from a long day of work driving his log truck for the Porter Brothers Timber Company. It was early spring in Mississippi, and the afternoon had brought through a swift storm front with some chilling rain, which resulted in a cold, overcast evening that yielded to an early nightfall. Corderal's arrival home was just minutes before the gray skies gave way to the black of night. Now warm inside his home, he shed his mud-covered boots and sought out the comfort of his trusty old recliner, carrying a bottle of his favorite drink in one hand and a ham and mayonnaise sandwich in the other. Once nestled comfortably on his recliner, he turned on his TV and began watching sports highlights and popped the top on the bottle. Though the storm had passed, light breezes still continued to flare up here and there, and Corderal could hear the sound of his wind chimes ringing on the porch, and the scratching of budding bush limbs against the peeling white painted boards of his home. After a couple of decompressing hours and a few more favorite drinks later, he cut off the TV, sat in reflection for a moment. Corderal lived alone out in the small wooden house. That is, he had been living alone ever since his live-in girlfriend Maria ran out on him last month, told him not to ever call again. This was right after she admitted to hooking up with an insurance salesman from Meridian, of whom she had said was a man with ambitions. He sat running his fingers through his salt and pepper beard, thinking to himself, "Well, old pal, we ain't getting any younger." This brought him to the realization that maybe a wife and kids just wasn't in the card for him at the age of 51. Heck with it all anyway, he thought, as he continued sitting in silence. I don't need all that nagging and clinging anyway. Feels quite well, doing as I please, when I please. This thought caused him to wheeze out a little laugh under his breath. Corderal lounged back, head warm and a little fuzzy from the drinks. His eyes began closing up shop on their own accord. As he began to doze off, he was thinking about how it'd be no time before work came around again in the morning. Right when he was in the place, between asleep and awake, he thought he heard creaking on the wooden steps of his front porch, and was pretty sure he had heard the crashing of the shovel he'd propped up against the rail. Corderal, now awake, sat still in the dark room. Completely dark because the TV had previously provided his only light. As moments passed, he began to doubt whether he'd heard anything at all. The wind chimes still tingled in the night breeze. He let the tenseness out of his body and began to sink back into the soft, embracing cushion of his recliner again, closing his eyes. Just before sleep found him, he heard a low thud, followed by a slight rattle sound. It almost sounded as if his screen door had been pulled open and let to hit the side of the wall. This time, he was for sure that he was hearing something. He now sat up in his chair, fully alert in the dark room, and continued to listen. What he heard next chilled his blood and caused his mind to snap into perfect clarity. He heard something softly bumping against the door as if it was searching in the dark for something. Most likely, he thought, the doorknob, because whatever was out there found it and it tried to turn it. Corderal thought thankfully to himself that tonight he had actually decided to lock the door, and now he was up and moving quietly to his bedroom to get his .38 special pistol out of the nightstand drawer. If someone was thinking to rob him, they were about to get a little midnight surprise. As he was getting near to reaching his bedroom in the small house, he heard the doorknob being shaken lightly, followed by one brief, rigorous attempt to turn it, before whoever was out there altogether stopped. Corderal continued to his bedroom and retrieved the pistol. Now, having the pistol, he thought about calling out a warning, but thought against it, not wanting to give away his position or the element of surprise. So instead, he moved quietly towards the door. Once he moved towards the door, he was going to flip the switch on the outside porch light, but he remembered the bulb had blown last week, and he hadn't replaced it yet. He cussed a little under his breath and moved towards the front window, going to make an attempt to discreetly look onto the porch. Corderal eased back the curtain and looked toward the door. The night was pitch black, but he thought he could somewhat make out the shape of someone standing right up against the door. With this knowledge, he now moved back behind his recliner and took up a position to open fire in case the intruder came through. But whoever was there was no longer making a sound. Time slowly passed, and Corderal now felt warm as the blood and the adrenaline pumped through his body, minutes feeling like hours. After some time, he heard whoever was out there move away from the door and creep back down the porch steps. He stayed in his defensive posting for what was probably another hour before he decided he was going to go get his flashlight and shine it out the window. When he came back to the window with his flashlight, he saw nothing except what appeared to be mud caked and slide streaked all over the porch, coming from up the steps all the way up to the door. As he studied the porch and the mud tracks, a bucket from out in the yard had been slung towards the window where he stood. Though he jumped and he was shaking in fear, he managed to turn the light just quick enough to see someone running through the yard, around his truck, and off around the other side of the house. Even through his fear, Corderal was now beginning to get angry, and since this person wasn't leaving, he was going to have to make them leave. In his mind, he was trying to rationalize the best plan. Yeah, he could call the police, but the police probably wouldn't make it out there for a couple of hours or so. They wouldn't be in any hurry. Forget the police, he thought. This is my house. No one is just going to come to my house and do me this way. Not at my own home. I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to shoot them. I'm just going to shoot them and be done with it. As he was thinking and talking to himself, whoever was out there had moved to the door at the back of his house and was trying to come through it, pulling and raking on it and turning the knob, and it almost seemed as if it was slowly giving away. The door at the back of the house was half rotted and weak, and he thought about this, and he headed on towards the back. Corderal quickly moved back into the back of the house into the laundry area, flipped on the light switch, and the bright lights filled the room. As his eyes adjusted to the brightness, he raised his pistol to where he thought it would hit center mass and fired 3 shots right through the soft wood. He heard a painful yell and what he thought was a guttural voice say,
"Why you shoot?"
Then, complete silence. Corderal next ripped the door open, flashlight aimed straight ahead, and was looking at nothing but the looming, eerie woods not 10 yards from the back of his house. Looking down, he saw blood trail off to his left, and when he raised his flashlight up, he saw who was out there, or more like, he saw what was out there. Not 5 feet away, he looked into the face of the most grotesque and horrifying thing he had ever seen in his whole life. It appeared human in nature, but the face was all wrong. Oh God, the face was all wrong. Oversized, black, menacing eyes stared back from a large, deformed, pale head. The mouth drooling hung crooked, full of brown, rotten teeth. Now, looking back towards Corderal, the mouth almost turned into a smile. This chilled Corderal all the way through his body. It peered at him from under long, stringy, thin hair and raised up one large, malformed hand with long, unmanicured fingernails. Corderal quickly fired off the other 2 rounds from his .38 and continued to squeeze the trigger, even after the gun was empty. The thing now angrily growled and pounced towards Corderal with an unnatural speed. There was no escape. It had him in its strong, inhuman grasp before he could even scream. The last thing he felt was the futile feeling of helplessness as his world went dark forever. After Corderal didn't come to work for a few days, some of the other drivers came by his house to check on him. They found Corderal's corpse out back by the wood line, and as they more closely examined, they noticed parts of Corderal had been eaten.